everyone, and welcome to the round 2 breakout session. I'm Dr. Samantha Vinokor-Meinrath, and I'm truly honored to be moderating this panel on digital spaces, hate, polarization, and activism. I'm also deeply disturbed both by the relevance of the topic and by the fact that I am on a panel about digital spaces. I come as an expert on anti-Semitism and a tech Luddite, so I am very excited to be learning as much, if not more, as anybody else here. I want to make the note, this panel was planned well before October 7th and the subsequent massive uprise in anti-Semitism around the world that so many of us are feeling the impact of. And now it's all the more timely and critical that we have this conversation. We know, particularly since the start of the COVID-19 pandemic, but also well before, that we can no longer bifurcate our existence into online versus real life. Everything that is happening online is both real and lasting, but is often different than our in-person interactions. And here we have an amazing group of experts today who are ready to delve into all of the complexities of our digital world. Rather than just read their bios, you can look them up in your QR codes. I'm actually going to ask each of our panelists to introduce themselves today by giving you their own brief stories of what brings you here today and what does our audience need to know about the critical work that you're doing. So I'm actually going to start opposite myself. Luc, we're going to kick it over to you.
This mic is working good. Hi, I'm Luc Bernard, and I pretty much made the first video game about the Holocaust called Light in the Darkness. Then I made a Holocaust Museum was in Fortnite. And long story short, I'm kind of the only person in the video game space, and we've kind of really changed Holocaust education. And that's it.
Amazing. Thank you for being here. Tal-Or, we'll kick it over to you.
Okay, hi everyone, great to see you here. My name is Tal-Or Cohen Montemayor. I'm the founder and CEO of Cyberwell. We're the first ever open database to monitor online anti-Semitism in English and in Arabic across the major social media platforms. So Facebook, Instagram, TikTok, YouTube, and what was once known as Twitter. The reason that I'm here today with you is to share some of the work that we've been doing since the start of the conflict, really with the platforms directly, the trust and safety teams, the content moderation teams, to explain to you guys not only what we're seeing, but what steps or what infrastructure is in place at those social media platforms and where it's working and where it's failing.
Elad.
Hi, I'm Elad. A few years ago, or a number of years ago, I left a Hasidic community. And I was a writer at the time, still a writer. And I was very interested, both for personal reasons, intellectually. I was curious about the experience of being in such a community and what were the parts that I felt were toxic and what weren't. And it caused me to delve very deeply into the dynamics of extremism. I became really fascinated by that. And at the same time, I'm also a marketer and have been, kind of very up close and personal with anti-Semitism online. And experiencing both of those made me realize, number one, that a lot of the stuff that I had seen in my experience were aligned with what I was seeing online. And number two, I was seeing the dynamics of how the internet spread this kind of hate. So those two things together caused me to write quite a lot about this. I write for The Forward. And I also started a campaign called X Out Hate to call out Elon Musk and the anti-Semitism I've seen on that platform.
Got applause already. So we're going to start with, I would say, a pretty general question that I'm going to put to all three of you, which is, we're at a moment where it seems like, particularly in our digital spaces, there's almost unfathomable both challenge and opportunity when it comes to digital activism, the rise in anti-Semitism. We could take this in positive, negative, challenging, existentially frightening ways. But that question being, what do you see as both the primary challenge and opportunity of this moment in the various digital spaces where you and where our audience spend their time? Does anyone want to jump in first?
Yeah, I'll jump in. So I really think that everybody in this room can resonate with the fact that what's different about what makes this war and this onslaught of Jewish hatred different than all other wars and dark times in Jewish history is the psychological weapon that social media has become for Israelis and for Jews everywhere. Unlike any other war where you would get news precipitously at different times, 2 days after it happened, several hours after it happened. Sure, we had our traditional media sources, but how much could you actually be glued to your television now? You, your kids, your grandkids are literally going to bed at night with the phone and their social media platforms right by their head and waking up to it in the morning. And now it's not just an issue of, real high integrity information, but the denial, the gaslighting, and even using graphic content as a way to terrorize Jews and Israelis through these social media platforms. So I think that the greatest challenge is just that role that social media has come to play in the way that we're all experiencing and that we're all dealing with this. And that affects us not only interpersonally, but definitely affects us from a security perspective as well. I say that just like the IDF was surprised on October 7th, so were the social media platforms. We witnessed a family being taken hostage and executed on Facebook live stream. That should give everybody pause. We saw videos of women being raped and paraded in the streets in Gaza, lynchings live streamed onto Twitter. This should give everybody pause. If we think that other terror organizations that are interested in attacking the United States are not taking notes from what Hamas did with social media platforms, we would be gravely mistaken. They are watching. This could absolutely turn into a national security threat for any government that would be under any kind of terror organization attack again. So I think that the challenge is just how present social media is in our life and the fact that there simply hasn't been enough investment in the technologies that are available to prevent this type of content from going viral and terrorizing and entrancing entire populations. That being said, it's also the opportunity, okay? So social media platforms, because of law, have invested in AI tools to help them prevent the spread of things like child pornography. And that's actually a very effective technology that exists today. If you've ever tried to upload a song onto a social media platform for a video of a loved one, like I did for my husband, I put a Queen song in the background, that thing was removed in 2 minutes. So where I come from, as the founder of Cyberwell and as an anti-Semitism professional, is if you can remove the Queen song in 2 minutes, you can do a much better job about removing violent Jew hatred, about calls to terror, graphic violence, et cetera. So I think the opportunity is that us as a society and us as a community, we need to take a moment here to understand that there can be better solutions to this situation, and we must start demanding it of these private companies.
Thank you.
Yeah, I'll speak to that as well. I mean, I think Tal-Or really touched on that really well. I mean, I'll add just that one of the biggest challenges we're facing right now, and I think it's super important that people really understand this, is that social media platforms are not meant to be fair areas of discourse. That is a marketing slogan. What they actually are essentially like addiction machines. Their goal is to keep you tapping, to keep you clicking, to keep you looking as much as possible at their content. Engagement is the number one goal, and the reason for that, and they've said this publicly, this is not like a secret, and the reason for that is the more you engage, the more likely you are to click on an ad. The more likely you are to click on an ad, the more monetization they get, the more revenue they achieve. And so by definition then, removing content that by definition is upsetting, which would increase engagement because it's upsetting, we react to it, they are incentivized to keep hate speech online. They're incentivized to keep violence on their site. They're incentivized to keep the kind of content that traumatizes us online. So almost everything is going against us. And I think not only that, we've gone through kind of this sunshine period with, or this honeymoon period, I should say, with the social media companies, where they were essentially trying to market themselves as fair places of discourse. And as you can see with Twitter and X and some other platforms, that's become less of a priority. In fact, for some, it's become an actual place for them to market their own propaganda. So this is really important, but I also think this also presents an opportunity. Because when we start to see the dynamics that are occurring, we also start to see that these platforms are not, we should not be engaging with them as if they're a fair platform. We should be engaging with them, as they are, which is companies that are invested in making money. And once we can work with that, we can call it out instead of hoping for fairness, we're going to be more likely to make a change. And I've seen it myself. I've seen it happen. It's hard. They're very big now. It's a tough challenge, but it is possible. And the way we do that is through moments like this.
Thank you. Luc, what about you?
Okay, I'm just making sure it works.
It works.
Yeah. So I guess I have a more positive outlook on things. So basically, video games, we're bigger than music and movies combined. We are. We're basically the shapers of culture nowadays. And so what I noticed with with my games pretty much, and the Fortnite Museum and also Light in the Darkness, is that we actually didn't receive any hate. There's been a huge hit in Saudi Arabia. Recently, I've seen there been an uptick in China. Funny enough, actually, since October 7th, our downloads and users have continued going up. They have. I think it's because we also approach things differently. So I just tell stories, I do pretty much. So I'm not like trying to put out slogans, signs, like don't be mean, don't do this and that. And people just get to experience a story. And I think that's why it worked in Saudi Arabia. So that's why I do think there's methods towards reducing extremism, and that's why I'm even actually talking to anti-terrorist groups, all those things. There is ways, and I think there is hope. I think social media is a dumpster fire. I think that's kind of, that's fucked, that is. But video games is kind of like, no one thought about it right, and it is really the market where you can actually push kindness and kind of empathy and all those things. That's kind of, I do see, digital platforms as a way forward. So one example, right? So for the Fortnite Museum, pretty much you work with Epic. And say inside that they did a Martin Luther King exhibit like a couple of years ago. And you could use emotes. Emotes are basically things where you can do dances or dumb things like, just things like that, right? It was in the game. But what happened inside the Martin Luther King exhibit, pretty much everyone started using the whip emote, pretty much. So that went really bad. So they kind of learned from that, and they helped me basically. So we disabled emotes, we disabled also voice chat, because also when I kind of launched that, I had Nick Fuentes after me. I did pretty much have to deal with that. But basically, by kind of managing to do those and kind of making it a safe space, disabling like the voice chat and the emotes, there's been no hate inside the museum, and I dare even say pretty much we're kind of even safer than real museums, because inside real museums you can take a selfie and do something dumb like they do at Outswitch, but you can't even do that inside our digital museum. So you can create new spaces, right, which can actually be very safe and very well done, and that's why I think we need to start thinking more outside the box, because again, video games, we shape culture, we do, and I think it's kind of, if I'm honest, I think it's utterly insane that someone like me pretty much took over that entire space. I honestly think that, my Holocaust Museum is getting nominated for an award on Monday, and I'm kind of like, it's a Fortnite Holocaust Museum. It's not, this is kind of insane, and I'm literally getting paid by Holocaust museums to advise them over a Fortnite Holocaust Museum. But that's basically, in my mind, the museum should have gotten into that space. The legacy organization should have gotten into that space. And I think pretty much what we're seeing with social media too is the legacy organizations, and I'm sorry I'm going a bit controversial, they don't understand it, and they're kind of very much far behind, they are, and that's why we're also, I think, in this issue which we're facing now, and that's why I think organizations like Cyberware, which I've known them for like close to a year now pretty much, they show the data, they know what they're doing pretty much, and that's why I think it's time for new leadership, but understands the digital space, and just kind of let them lead pretty much.
I just want to add, if I can,
Please.
I think there are two components to what Luc was talking about. One is storytelling for the younger generation as a way to revisit, repackage, and renew the stories of what it means to be Jewish and what Israel means even. There are definitely games that could be created around telling more accurate portrayals of Zionism or Israel. So I think that that's a very important and compelling takeaway for storytelling as a way to readdress and re-educate. But the other element is to understand that when we talk about social media platforms, like Elad was saying, these are private companies. So our strategies when addressing these issues must be rooted in private companies' interest. Cyberwell comes at it from an issue or from the lens of compliance, digital policy compliance. Another lens is advertiser revenue, right? Because that, at the end of the day, that's what interests these companies. And it's very important as a community that we recognize that our classic strategies of advocacy, of education and relationship building may need an update when it comes to working with private companies.
I think it's a really important point, and I think I want to speak more to how social media is really an incubator for extremism in so many ways. And I'll share an anecdote of a young woman who I had the pleasure of working with when I began the research on anti-Semitism that ultimately became my book, which is called #Antisemitism, as, again, someone who doesn't know any of this. She came from an interfaith family that was both Jewish and Romani, part of the Roma people. And as one does when they are a teenager and develop a niche interest, she created an Instagram and TikTok account called Jewish Romani. And for a brief time, she experienced what I was calling like the best of social media, that she found the other 30 people who had the same shared interest of her based on the hashtags that she was using, who were interested in Jewish Romani recipes and stories and connecting. And then all of a sudden she started to gain a little bit of traction. And every post that she would make, she sent me a post of herself learning how to make gefilte fish, which I'll be controversial and say, I don't know why one would do this, but nonetheless, she, thank you, getting support. She posted herself trying to learn how to make gefilte fish with these Jewish hashtags, and all of a sudden she's getting Free Palestine, death to the Jews, and she called me and said, Samantha, I don't understand. I didn't say anything about Israel. I'm actually probably far more left and pro two-state solution than most people in the Jewish community. And all of a sudden, death threats, rape threats, Hitler should have killed both sides of your family because both the Jewish and the Roma people were victims of the Nazis. And ultimately, she made this decision to shut down her platforms for mental health purposes because Tal-Or, exactly what you were saying, you can't leave this type of bullying behind. Do you go to sleep with it, with the people giving you death and rape threats, and then you wake up and it's the first thing that you get to see? It's not like being in school and someone was mean to you and then you go home. And I'm wondering, Elad, I'll start with you, if you want to speak to, is there a why in terms of the extremism, in terms of the hatred that is coming forth on these accounts, and is there something that we can be doing, or is this just how it is?
Well, I think there's a number of whys. I mean, I think one of them is just the basic principle that can maybe also give us a little hope, is that the nature of the internet is that we're all connected. And the nature of the internet is that the boundaries of the past don't exist anymore, at least not in the way that we used to have them. We definitely have new boundaries, but the ones that we're used to are no longer there, especially if we grew up at a time when the internet didn't exist. So the reason I say that is because I think there was a lot of hate before. It was just that we weren't exposed to it constantly. And you know, this is a big discussion around news as well. We tend to see, even though, and I'm not arguing that the world is necessarily better, but the truth is things like crime have gone down and these kinds of things. And yet, our experience, because of our digital experience, tends to shape our worldview quite a bit, especially if we use it a lot, like a younger generation. And so our perception of reality gets a little bit warped, or maybe very warped, because we're just constantly exposed to negative information. So I think that's part of the answer, and I think, you know, that there's also a good side to that, which means that we get to expose goodness to people and, you know, lack of extremism and positivity to people that would otherwise not have it. So those boundaries kind of go both ways. I think there's another element that's going on, which is that, and this is, again, part of really understanding the dynamics without a moralizing point to it, is that there are extremist groups, hate groups, and Hamas is a great example after their attack, but you know, far-right groups do this as well, is that they're aware of what social media is, which it's a marketing platform if you're you know, an advertiser, for example, and they're using it like that. So what that means is that those people then are exploiting the mechanism of social media in order to, and I think again, this gives a little hope, hopefully, their goal is to appear bigger than they are. Because one of the things they really want people to understand, just like a terror attack, like the whole idea is to make it feel like that you are about to get attacked at any moment, even though they're incredibly rare. It doesn't change the dynamic of how terrifying it is and how horrible it is, but that's the reality. And so the same dynamic is happening online. They want both potential sympathizers to feel like this and to feel like they have a home, as much as those of us they're trying to scare. So we're essentially, these people, they're not a massive percentage of the audience, but they're everywhere because, they're pathetic, they're losers, and so they go online and they bother people. And I think it's really important, to understand there's a very small group of people that are really trying to hurt others. And I think when we do that, we also understand that there's mechanisms that can prevent it for that reason. Mm-hmm. And I think at that point we start to understand that this is, ultimately we can talk about all these bigger dynamics, but at the end of the day, there are a few companies that hold a lot of power that could instantly solve a lot of these problems, and they choose not to.
Mm-hmm. I would say that also, I tell a story about, I was late for a flight in Atlanta. I had a situation where security didn't let me through, and I had to ask every single person in line in security to get to the front of security. In a line of 65 people, there were 2 people that told me no, and very rudely. And I called my husband and I told him this story, and he was like, those 2 people, I can't believe them, what's wrong with them? And I said, okay, but there were 63 other people who said no problem. What social media does and what social media is doing right now, when it comes to this issue of Jewish identity and Israel, is just focusing on those 2 people who said no, and a resounding no, right? Israelis and Jews are in a time of crisis, we're in a time of need, we're being hurt, we're afraid for our security, and all we get told is, online, those 2 people get amplified again and again and again and again, saying you deserve it, saying it didn't really happen, saying, but what about? Okay? So that's very important to understand in terms of perspective. And I don't want to say that doesn't mean that the numbers are not in our favor, because unfortunately, the numbers are always a problem when it comes to being a safe Jew in the world, okay? But it is important to understand that the social media platforms are acting as an amplifier for negative feedback around our identity and around Israel. And when you talk to your kids about using social media and maintaining their own mental health, that's important to have that conversation. It's like the people in line at the airport. There's always going to be 2 that are going to tell you, no, there's a lot more that are actually with us, and they are friends. And it could be that it's a silent majority, and it's about mobilizing that silent majority as well. But the point that you touched on with this story is something that should be deeply, deeply concerning to all of us. 1 in 3 adults that are Jewish between the ages of 18 and 30, if they experience online anti-Semitism, are more likely to hide their Jewish identity, online and in public. And not only that, there are Jewish organizations, legacy organizations that we have invested as communities so much in, so much knowledge, so much professionalism, time, et cetera, who literally open a TikTok account today and they close it in a month because they can't deal with the level of online anti-Semitism and the hate in the comment section. So in the digital content world, that element is online harassment and bullying. And what Cyberwell is working to do with the platforms is to increase both the flagging, monitoring, and account removal capability in that space in order to help specifically Jewish influencers and Jewish organizations have a more safe presence online. But it's something that you guys, we have to understand this. Over half of the worldwide internet activity is on our mainstream social media platforms. Teenagers are spending sometimes an average of 100 hours a week on TikTok. Imagine a world where there are no more Jews on TikTok, or there are no more Jewish organizations on TikTok. We cannot afford not to be there, so we have to be there, but we have to do it with the best available technology.
I think it's such a critical point. I know there's research happening now focusing on Jewish teens who go to Israel, North American Jewish teens who go to Israel on peer summer trips, who are creating like separate fake TikTok and Instagram accounts because they're not going to post because that's how they express themselves and sense of self and who they are, but they don't want their regular feeds to then be clogged with what they know is coming in terms of anti-Semitism. And at the same time, many of us saw or perhaps even sent out information earlier this month from schools and Jewish communal institutions saying, get your kids off of Instagram and TikTok because of what Hamas is about to put out there. And I don't know any teens who are necessarily off any of these platforms, but I don't want to necessarily focus on that question right now. I want to focus on the question of the value add and the positive and the joy that digital platforms can bring to our young people and people of any age. And so, Luc, I want to kick this over to you.
So I want to answer the question before.
Oh, please. Okay,
however,
switch back over.
Actually, so I would say I might just disagree a bit, because what I'm seeing happening within my industry, right, was in the gaming industry, not the players. So me at this point, I actually don't believe, because everyone's always kind of like, let's fix the players pretty much. I'm like, you have to fix society first, pretty much. That's a bit hard. I see it as the gaming industry problem now. So I haven't slept pretty much since yesterday, and the reason why is because I've also been dealing with, basically the gaming industry itself have been like attacking Jewish game developers they have, spouting all kinds of vile things at them, even if the Jewish game developer just be like, I don't like Hamas, and they're like, oh, you're fucking Zionist, fucking die. I'm going to write to your employer. Like basically a guy from Epic Games, that's Fortnite, he pretty much right now is getting harassed. They're threatening to go after his job, all those things. You literally inside Ubisoft, they have Assassin's Creed, all those games, right? One of the heads of communications literally calls the Hamas a resistance group on social media. And so you have all these people in positions of power, right? Pretty much pushing to be pro-Hamas, which is bullying other game developers to also be like them, because it's, the gaming industry, if I'm honest, it's full of, imagine Hollywood, but worse, pretty much. No, it's full of rape, everything. Like, it's fucking terrible. And the problem is the people in power, pretty much, the anti-Semites, who also claim to be, I'm kind and all those things. I mean, I know how many times in the past week I've seen literal game developers call Israelis Nazis. Like, you can criticize the Israeli government, you can like, fuck Bibi, you can say all those things, like, but what the fuck is wrong with you? And these are these people in power. And the problem is, again, legacy organizations are so obsessed with Hollywood, with music, with all those things, they're letting everything run rampant inside video games. So pretty much, I can't get legacy organizations to kind of work, to get their shit together, pretty much, to even stop getting these, to talk to these companies, pretty much, have to again talk to people like Cyberwell, because no one knows what they're doing. And that's what we're basically enabling. Because we're ignoring the video game industry, pretty much, it's getting radicalized. I'm seeing it happen. And so all these things on social media is actually having a huge consequence for people inside my industry. And I'm not someone who rings the bell often and be like, the panic, everything's bad, as you saw earlier. But it is really fucking bad. It is, and I really think we need to pay attention to this and be able to be in this space to talk to the companies and stop this. Because again, it's pro-Hamas. It's not even like free Palestine, I prefer Palestinians and the Israelis. It's literal Hamas. It is. And it's running rampant, and it's completely allowed. So social media is radicalizing people in the gaming industry, and these are these people in power. These are these people with the shapers of culture. So you can imagine what the fuck is going to happen kind of next 10 years, pretty much. I mean, I'll give you guys one example. Neil Druckmann, he's the director of The Last of Us, which is also an HBO show. It was also a video game, right? Everyone kind of knows it, massive thing. When October 7th happened, he just posted a picture of the flag, and pretty much with a heartbreak, he got attacked. Not one single person in the gaming industry came out in support of him. They're just me, pretty much. And then basically he posted another thing and be like, I'm donating to, Israeli organizations and also Palestinian organizations. Attacked again. Huge silence. So imagine this. The biggest video game director, he's up there, imagine he's kind of like a Spielberg, he is, gets no fucking support. Silence from the entire industry. That's just how fucking bad it is. And it's, of course, because of social media, because of people bullying. I honestly think if social media didn't exist and if, game developers weren't so fucking toxic, right, and kind of getting radicalized by the second, I don't think we'd be where we are now. And that was it.
Joy?
That was the
Elad?
positivity.
We can.
Positivity comments.
I think it's all important words. Maybe before we get to the joy, actually, because the joy is coming. Don't worry, everybody. But before we get to the joy, we're all talking about extremism. And Tal-Or, I know that you have stats to share with us and some new numbers that have come out. So let's give some more context. And then I promise, once we've really depressed everyone, I'm going to come back to my joy question.
So what?
It's coming, I promise.
There will be joy. What I have with me here today, and I have some copies for those of you who are very interested, is kind of a meta-analysis of all of the compliance alerts that we've put out for social media platforms directly. So we work directly with their trust and safety teams, their content moderation teams, and their policy teams. And this gives you a look at what were the trends in online anti-Semitism, glorification to terror, and graphic content that happened since the beginning of October 7th. One of the things that I think is very important to pay attention to is that the classic anti-Semitic narratives, including things like the Jews killed Jesus, which we're typically flagging for the platforms on a regular day, these classic anti-Semitic narratives also took off following the October 7th attacks, that specific accusation rising about 50% across social media platforms. But then there are things that are a lot more vivid and violent, and that frankly, even though we have these relationships with the social media platforms and we've gotten them to remove, sometimes at an 100% removal rate, take automated steps to block things, the response time is what really bothered me. So we had trends such as hashtag Hitler was right, which by the way is on Twitter all the time, but it increased in Arabic almost 30,000% following the October 7th attacks, okay? Another example is Al-Aqsa, the word Al-Aqsa Tawfiq, the flood, and Yehud in Arabic. That was giving us a 90% violent rate. It had a lot of violent videos that were connected to it as well. We have another from the gaming industry, a sermon by an imam from Turkey. It was actually in 2020, but was popularized after the October 7th attacks. And now there are open calls in Arabic across social media to do battleground against the Jews. So literally you can imagine just asking people to open the borders, calling the Arab world to open the borders and to come in and to mass execute Jews and Israelis. So this is some of the information that we're seeing. It is interesting to see the pivot very quickly into classic anti-Semitism, which I think is one thing that this community needs to be aware of. The levels of online anti-Semitism because of the attacks on October 7th. It's not going to stay contextually in Arabic about Al-Aqsa and about Hamas and about Israelis. It has very quickly taken a pivot to actually target Jews. The joy in why Cyberwell is awesome is that we're flagging these data sets for the social media platforms directly, and we literally work with them to identify what can be automated, what can we automatically block, what can we automatically de-amplify and control. And another joyful element I'll highlight is that there really are good people at each of these platforms. I'm lucky enough to work with them. However, it's going to take consistent pressure and a strategic approach on this issue of big tech and social media by this community in order to maintain that pressure. And we will have to maintain it.
Thank you. Oh, so as we lead back towards the joy question, because I don't know that we're fully there yet, I do want to speak to a question of action. So for those of us who are here, we're here because we care. Maybe we're users of these platforms trying to become better digital citizens and better users. Maybe our kids are on these platforms. If we aren't necessarily, what are steps that the people in this space can be taking either individually or as a collective Jewish community to help try to make things better on the platforms that each of you are speaking to?
So, you know, it's interesting. I was realizing this will hopefully help with the segue to joy. But I was realizing when I was speaking, I was feeling, which I don't usually do when I'm speaking, but it's such a hard subject. I was feeling like the bitterness come out that I had. And I feel like one of the important things in these panels to remember, or any discussion like this, is the people who are dealing with this stuff, we are looking at it constantly. It's very dark because we're exposed to it constantly in a very dark way. It's not It's not, we have, at least me, I'm not sure how others, but I know a lot of people that kind of have this perverse interest in like delving into that. In a weird way, it helps me because I feel a sense of control, I guess, with it. But one of the things I've actually learned has been that if we do really want to, if we want to handle these experiences correctly, especially for people that are not that kind of person, which is like 99.9% of the world, thank God. The one important thing to remember is that, this thing I mentioned about social media being kind of addictive. It's really the dynamics of it are addictive, literally addictive. It's based off of casinos, where you get sometimes you get a big reward where you get a lot of likes. Sometimes you get small, and actually that variant in rewards is part of the mechanism that keeps us coming back. So when we know all those things, it gives us a sense, it gives us a little bit more control because we start to understand, I'm dealing with an addictive brand. It's made to keep me on it. So if we want to take care of ourselves, anyone knows that someone who sits in a casino all day and pulls a slot machine might feel a sense of thrill at the moment, but in general is not going to feel so good. I actually think one of the main ways, especially an individual as opposed to like a community and organization can make a difference, is to take care of themselves and to not get so caught up in this social media stuff. Because on the other hand of all the darkness, which is all real, there is this other part which is like real life is not like that, for most of us, thank God. And when we don't let ourselves get too caught up in all the darkness, we start to remember this is not the entire reality. And actually social media, what it does and what hate groups do, which is part of their goal, is to convince us that these things are all real and bigger than they are, as I mentioned before. Mm-hmm. So I do think a big part of this is not getting caught up. Because the thing is, the reason and a big part of how these groups recruit is because they use this addiction to their benefit. What they do is what happens is the more we get addicted, if you know anything about QAnon, right, or if you know anything about kind of the stories of people that will watch a channel for a really long time just obsessing over bad news, what's really fascinating about that is that those people get lost in very, very dark realities. Essentially what happens is they get fully enveloped in this belief that the world is incredibly dark and they need to do something extreme to fight back against it. And the truth is that we are all vulnerable to that, because really the dynamic is meant to, in that context, is meant to make people feel like the world is incredibly dark and give up hope for everyday life, and then put a lot of hope into something fantastic or fantastical. So I think, honestly, one of the best things we can do is learn how to prevent that by really tapping into reality a bit more and a little bit less on the kind of stuff that literally radicalizes people. We might not become radicalized, but we could become incredibly hurt or depressed or other negative things. So honestly, I really think the best way to deal with these things is take care of ourselves.
Mm-hmm. Amazing, thank you.
Okay, so I have a couple of key recommendations from the level of a person who wants to be a digital activist and to use your social media presence as a form of digital activism, all the way through kind of more strategic and community stuff. So number one is, I absolutely agree with Elad, mental health. Anytime you enter a social media platform, you're either participating in advertising, you should literally just tell yourself, I'm participating in advertising, I'm going shopping, or I'm going to see how people are reacting to the news. That's all you can find on social media. There's really nothing else there, okay? So tell yourself that, be mindful of that. People, I'm talking, it doesn't matter what age you are, if you're 18, if you're 80 and you're on social media, that's what you're doing. You're participating in advertising, you're seeing how people are responding to news. Tell yourself that before you go in every single platform, number one. Number two, if you want to be a digital activist, and Elad also talked about, it's important in these situations to create moments of control. And I find, and we also found at Cyberwell, that we use AI to monitor and flag this information at scale, but we have community members who really do want to take an active part in kind of cleaning up their own digital spaces and being digital activists through reporting. So we have now an online reporting form where when you report your social media, when hate and misinformation and disinformation that you'll see about being Jewish or Israel, report that information. It's important. The social media platforms owe you. They made a promise to you as their users that you are not supposed to be subject to online harassment because of your identity. You're anyways looking at this content, take the extra 1 or 2 minutes to report it. And I mean that for every single piece of content that you do. Because when you do, when that report is seen by somebody, when it passes the AI barrier, and then the content moderation team makes a decision to remove that content, you're actually training the algorithms of the social media platforms to better identify anti-Semitism. That's something we don't really think about. We just get frustrated. We say, oh, I'm not going to report it. Anyways, it's not going to be removed. No. You already took 5 minutes to read the crap content. Go ahead and report it, okay? If you want to take another step, you can also send that information to us, and we will escalate it. That is our job. We put this information into these bigger reports, and we work with the social media platforms to remove this information at scale. So we can offer that as a resource. We're at app.cyberwell.org. I can also be in touch with anybody who's interested in actually bringing that to schools. We do hackathons for high school students and for college students on how to better identify online anti-Semitism and to report. On a more meta strategy, I am sure that there are people sitting in this room who are either invested directly in social media or in the advertising space. This is the linchpin. This is the key, okay? Working with advertisers to bring more awareness to how they are monetizing this process. Cyberwell is going to be doing an analysis, an ad tech analysis. Where are ads actually monetizing online anti-Semitism? We need to start putting pressure on the commercial stakeholders to be more active in holding these social media platforms to account. And all of you also have your local legislators and your congressmen and senators. There needs to be more grassroots pressure, and I can tell you there's no community that would benefit more from reforming Section 230 and from increasing social media accountability with fines in the law than the Jewish community. So that needs to be our focus. Truly, we just need it, okay? Because the numbers are not in our favor. So we have to think wisely about how else we can address it. So that's my big arc recommendation.
Thank you.
Was it about joy?
Yeah, sure.
We
Joy,
still
yes.
haven't gotten to the joy one, but you can take the joy question. This was about things that we could all be doing
To
and
be better
practical.
users.
And maybe we could be bringing
Yeah,
joy.
I have no advice for social media users whatsoever.
Or for
Be strong.
game users.
No advice for them either.
No advice for them either.
No, I'll be honest. I don't want gamers to become activists. I don't want Jewish. I just want them to play games. I don't want them to become activists and get hate, all those things. I'm very much. But that's for gaming. That's just my opinion.
It's fair.
It is.
So I'd love to speak more then to the gaming space, and particularly the work that you're doing in terms of games as education, or that the Jewish community has put onto games as a platform for education and for learning. We know how many of our young people and people in general are in gaming environments and using gaming platforms, and I'd love to, I think the audience would appreciate to hear more about what it means and what it looks like to do this in an educational way.
Well, so the average player age is actually 35. It is. A lot of people think it's kids. It's not. Like I said, just for you, I mean, I'm 37. Just for you, our kind of generation, as playing video games is as normal as reading a book or watching a movie. It's more the mainstream, I guess, and some other people haven't caught up to it. So that's more why that people think that. But what was the question?
How's
haven't
gaming,
slept, so-
gaming a way to
So,
educate?
How does it educate? Okay, yeah. Well, pretty much to With Light in the Darkness, I just told a story, pretty much. So imagine instead of a film, it's an interactive film. It is. And since why people gravitate more towards games than film, right? And nowadays is because film, you're just passive, you're just looking at it, and you're just kind of like, it's cool, but, you know. While games, you can actually be inside it. So that's why actually anti-terrorist groups have been looking at my work towards, you know, could this actually make people more empathetic, things like that. I'm not going to claim it does yet, because, you know, it just launched in February, it did. But like I said, the success we've had in the Arab world in Saudi Arabia, I've never received a hateful message from the game, and we have had millions of users, and 42% of players finish it. The average completion rate is 10%. It is, so I've never seen any kind of hate, which is kind of just a fascinating thing. It is. But the Fortnite Museum is because they literally can't do it, so that's probably why on that one too. But Light and Darkness, no hate. So it's just been Saudi players just posting about Chinese players. Like, everyone kind of comes away from it actually touched and more empathetic, and they recommend it. All those things. That's why we've reached so many users with $0 in marketing. So I think just in terms of video games, and also I think there's also another problem, the word education actually. So Holocaust education, that's so fucking weird if I'm honest, is that word right? Because what are people trying to educate? Are they trying to educate how the Nazis did a genocide? Or are they trying to make people more empathetic? And that's why I don't like the term Holocaust education anymore. Because even if we look at it, it's not working. It isn't, clearly. So that's like, I think it needs to be directed more towards empathy and actually caring about what people went through, pretty much. So that's why I honestly, say for example, I'm a big believer in Schindler's List. I think Schindler's List changed everything. I think because it was a story. And I think a lot of the Holocaust education field completely missed that point. Sure, Foundation got it, because they're like, let's record survivors' testimonies, let's have them tell their story. But a lot of people bloody didn't get it well. They didn't pretty much. They went the entire opposite of it. But video games can allow empathy on a level kind of not seen before, because again, you are the character, you are the people, and that's why I think pretty much it's so fascinating when I see people actually play the game, like, majority of them, they're just bloody crying at the end, and then they're kind of like, I didn't know this happened, and then they go into these grand speeches about how the world is fucked now, we need to all be kind, etc. But it's good. It's pretty much that they all end up kind of like these weird hippie-like people. But that's just the power of video games. But again, first and foremost, it's the power of storytelling. It's the power of empathy it is. And you've got to adapt to where the audience is now. And the differences between social media. So say, imagine you could have someone on social media post all these things, right? With a video game, you actually have to sit down. You actually have to pay attention to it. You're not on your phone where every 2 seconds there's something popping up at you crazy. So that's why it works more than if you try to reduce hate within social media, because people see a thing, oh cool, I'm going to reshare it. They just don't have enough time. There's not enough time to actually pay attention to it and all those things. So again, I'm not listening to social media. I think there's Holocaust survivors on TikTok are bloody great, but that's why I think video games just work better in terms of empathy.
I like that. So I like that. We could all use a bit more empathy. And should I try again to get us to joy? We'll see how it goes. I will reframe the question because I don't remember fully what I said the first time. But to be able to speak to, again, for many, there's been this impulse of, we see that social media and the digital platforms that we spend time on in particular, are they correlating with a rise in mental health issues and bullying, that we see that, again, Elad, as you were saying, some of the best things that we could do are to step away and to allow for that dose of reality, and this isn't the be-all, end-all of existence. And these are sources of joy, joy for those of us who engage on them, who are able to find spaces of community, spaces of meaning-making on them as well. So I'm wondering if, to the extent that everyone is able to on the various platforms that you spend time, you can speak a little bit to the joy/opportunity therein.
Yeah. Sorry, do you want to go?
No, go ahead.
I started last time. All right. So
Attempt number 2.
So for me, it's interesting because like I said, I have a lot of negative things to share about social media. But the truth is, it's because I'm a social media user. I came up through Facebook, through these different things, and the thing that attracted me to these platforms is still there, which is what I mentioned before, where the reason we're exposed to hate speech is also because we're exposed to people we never would have been exposed to before. And the reason, and what I've gotten out of that, it's changed my life. As because I spend a lot of time on there. I'm a writer. I'm on Twitter much more than I should be. I connect with Palestinians, I connect with Muslims, I connect with right-wing Jews, left-wing Jews, I connect with Christians, I connect with people in Kenya, and this is something that almost sounds commonplace now, but is a miracle it would have been a miracle 20, 30 years ago. And I was just talking with my kids, explaining to them, do you know we had to pay to call someone somewhere else, and it cost a lot to call somewhere. And my wife reminded me also, it costs money to just call a different area code. And I was like, that's why we have area codes. I forgot, and I was just amazed by it. I mean, it's really amazing, when you think about it. And to me, that's where the opportunity is and the joy, because connecting with all these different people to me is like a dream come true. But it's also led to a lot of, the activism I've done, for example, which is like this X Out Hate campaign. Was the goal of it was to get as broad of a community as possible of Jewish leaders to call out this problem, because we considered it very serious. Unfortunately, now that some issues seem quaint, but what was really exciting for me was I got right-wing people to join it. I also got If Not Now members to sign
Yeah,
it.
I was shocked. Good for you.
Thank you. And I think like that, there's so much opportunity there. And then what happened after that was after the attacks, I spoke with my Muslim leaders that I know, that I'm connected to. And I said, what if we did something similar to this? And they were very open to, it's still in the works. But my point is kind of that even those acts, even if they're not necessarily, they're one drop in a much larger ecosystem of change. They give people hope. They make people remember that we're in this together, that we're not, these moments make us feel like we're alone. They make us feel like we only have, a narrow group of people that can work with us. But the truth is, there's so much more out there. There's so many people, as much as we see all these people that are angry, there are so many people, as I've noticed myself, there are so many people that resonate with messages of humanity and messages of human rights. And these are things that are at the core of humanity. And really what's happening is getting perverted through the negative aspects of social media. So if it is possible, both through social media and to other places, to tap into that humanity, it's just a method of how. It's a reminder that really I really believe the way we're going to make ultimate change is through solidarity and connection to other communities. And I'm already seeing it happen.
I appreciate that so much, because I think it gives a different spin to, I feel like a lot of us will derisively use the phrase like armchair activism or social media activism, that how is it really doing something if I share that meme, I share that picture, I write that tweet to the guy's 3-digit number of followers that I happen to have. Is it ever enough? And I think by you giving it this lens of connecting and humanity, for those of us who we don't necessarily know what to do but want to use our voices and our micro platforms, there is still a space, however small, within that. Tal-Or, let's take the joy.
I want to echo that. I think that the connection that social media platforms offer with diverse people who you would literally never have a chance to meet with, talk on the street to. Elad is actually a great example. Elad reached out to Cyberwell. I didn't get to meet him in real life until right now. But it's a funny thing, because like we educate our kids to like put yourself out there, and you should on social media. It's just you have to do it with a certain amount of understanding of what that means when you put yourself out there, okay? But you should put yourself out there. And not everybody is an expert on Israel. Who cares? Like, it doesn't matter. I mean, you should be sharing content that is authentic to yourself. And I would caution you actually about sharing emotions a lot, because then you're really putting your vulnerable self out there. But anything that's authentically you in this moment, if it's emotional grief, if it's information that you think people should know, I would really encourage you to, yes, put yourself out there. Just know that there's going to be some backlash, and you should know that some of it's also fake, some of it's bots, some of it really shouldn't touch you at all. Like it's an error in the machine. Like, let it not touch you. But also look for places to connect with people that are outside of your immediate echo chamber bubble, okay, online. It's one of the easiest ways that you can do it. And I think that we'll be surprised to see how much more receptive people genuinely are. So I really do encourage you to put yourselves out there. Just be aware that it's like a very toxic shopping experience. That's basically what I have to say. But connection is a great thing.
I love that.
Connection is a powerful thing. And social media does enable you to do that.
Love that. Thank
I'm not a social media expert, so I have nothing to say.
That's
think I
okay.
said
There
it.
could be joy in the gaming
Oh, well,
space
it'd be
too.
similar to what I said before, pretty much about how it's worked.
All right, so I want to give everyone a chance. Oh, I see it. Oh, what a good question. I don't think
I actually paid him to say
you
that.
paid him to say that. Well, all right. I will take a couple of questions. I don't think we have the mic, so I'm just going to ask people to be really loud, and I will repeat the question. So, okay. Oh my gosh. Okay, a lot of questions. All right, I'll start back there, and then I'll make my way forward, please.
Hi, my name is Lenny Silverman. I'm the CEO of Lost Tribe. So I have a question. It's more on the joy. How I just connected with you on LinkedIn, so I hope you accept it.
See?
So the connection
Joy
was made.
in real life.
We have a LinkedIn connection happening in front of our eyes.
The joy is that we have almost 100,000 followers on our 3 TikTok platforms, another 100,000 on our other social media platforms. And to you, Luc, we're now in the Fortnite creative world, and we created our own summer camp, and now we're going to be creating some games, loosely educational games connected to Israel, from Masada to
Amazing.
race throughout the country. So there's some joy.
Amazing. Thank you. I've been wanting it this whole time, so we will all check out Lost Tribe for the joy that I was seeking here. Please.
So I'm wondering whether there is a gold standard of filters or guidelines that a social media company can adopt that is both socially responsible and consistent with a profitable economic model. And if there isn't, why aren't we putting time into inventing that to shape the industry around what we want, rather than let the industry run amok according to its greatest profit incentive?
So the question was if there's a gold standard that exists already for a social media platform in terms of their both profitability and their communications guidelines, speech, so hate speech, rules, regulations, and if not, why not? So
So
Please.
what I was going to say, because I have a startup and been in the tech world pretty much, I mean, yeah, the problem is there's been lots of social media companies which have kind of tried doing that, and they've all kind of failed. They haven't not made any money, kind of thing. So that's the problem I see.
I want to just say that the way that Cyberwell approaches this is that there's something in every social media platform called community guidelines or rules, okay? So the hate speech rules exist. That's the good news, that they exist. Then there's the implementation challenge around those rules, okay? And most social media platforms have a built-in algorithm, where Elad was talking about it, that it's like to the 1 degree. 1 degree more extreme, 1 degree more naked, 1 degree more profanity in order to keep you engaged. When content moderation systems, and that includes human beings, and that also includes classifiers or AI, are neglected or removed like they were on X, then that goes off the rails. And what you'll see is the feed, the content that you're being pushed as a user, will become much more violent, much more pornographic, et cetera. And what's interesting is that, that certain major platforms have recognized, including Google, in terms of Google search, and Meta, Facebook and Instagram, that if the content gets too extreme, actually users leave. Okay? And that's what's happened with X. It's one of the reasons that also advertisers are pulling away from X because of this exact problem. Also because they don't want their ads associated with this anymore. So the question that you're asking is, how do we get it to a profitability model where it's still engaging you more, because that's the whole point of the advertising machine, but it has a cap on it, right? And so the answer to that is it's different for every piece of content or every vector of content that we're looking to moderate. In anti-Semitism, it's an extremely nuanced and complex form of hate. But that's exactly what Cyberwell is trying to do, is to give the data sets to these social media platforms so that they can strike that balance between what's violating policy and what's going to keep people engaged, and also respect their free speech rights on the platform.
Awesome, thank you. Please. Over here. Yep, yep.
Hello. One, I'd like to say I went to the Fortnite Museum. It was very cool.
Yes.
We have a user of the Fortnite Museum.
I'd also like to ask, just because on social media, I think one of the things that makes it so engaging for me and for people, my peers, teens like me, is the aspect of free speech and being able to see so many different perspectives. So how do we strike down against certain speech without crossing that dangerous line of, oh, well, some people view this as really extreme, but there's also people on the other side who view it as nothing, but they view what I'm saying as really extreme. So how do we strike up that balance?
Awesome. So the question being about free speech and how do we strike the balance of different perspectives on what counts as really extreme. I sense you wanting to answer the
so
question.
this will be quick because I'm French even if I sound British. So pretty much in France, we do have a difference between hate speech and free speech. So hate speech, it gets fined, it does all those things. And we also, what free speech is to us is pretty much to kind of be like, fuck the government did this kind of thing. That's what it's all about, pretty much. In America, what I've noticed as a European, America doesn't understand the difference between hate speech and free speech. So that's one. Among Americans, a lot of Jewish Americans too, which I've noticed, will often be like, no, we can just use free speech and it will stop Nazism. I'm like, didn't stop it in Europe. So that's really what I would say, because we've really got to, like, America just needs to understand the bloody difference. So I just wanted to say that pretty much.
I agree with that 100%. So just like Luc said, there's a difference between free speech and hate speech, even though legally in the United States that difference is not really super clear. There's a difference between paid speech and free speech. And I think that this is an education point for everyone, not just teenagers, but really for everyone, that needs to be driven home very, very quickly, okay? When you go on a social media platform, you're participating in paid speech. That is an algorithmically, commercially empowered tool to make you stay on the platform. It is not the same thing, constitutionally, philosophically, or otherwise, as you going out onto the street, getting up on a soapbox, and putting up a sign that says, I love Hamas. It's just not the same thing, okay? Because yes, it's not against your government, number one. That's the definition of free speech, what the government can and cannot tell you to do. Be very clear about that. But number two, when you get out on a soapbox on Sunset Boulevard, guess what? You're not influencing, nor touching, nor traumatizing millions of people. It's simply not the same thing. So I think free speech and hate speech are not the same, but I definitely think that free speech and paid speech are certainly not the same. Does the balance still need to be drawn? Like I was asked a lot in this conference about, should Free Palestine or From the River to the Sea be considered anti-Semitic speech on social media? And my answer is no, because that actually is an intellectual unpacking that should be being done in traditional media and in academia and in politics, and we should be actively delegitimizing that notion. That's our job. There's so much overt, ugly, violent hate speech that we can start with literally just moderating and de-amplifying right now. So yeah,
Thank you. I'll take this question and then one over here.
I'm curious about how much of the dumpster fire is algorithmically produced by bots, and how does that change the proportion of what we see in social media?
how much of it's reduced?
Is produced, I think.
Oh, produced.
So the question was about bots and the
Yeah.
algorithm versus like the real people.
That shapes our experience,
Absolutely.
how much iron there is behind
Absolutely.
hate speech.
Absolutely. And there's also a lot of evidence to suggest in networks of bots that there's a lot of state-sponsored bot networks from Russia, from Iran, and from places that will take bot farms out in India or in Malaysia or Indonesia and definitely influence the things that we're seeing and we're experiencing. And I don't know if this is going to make anybody feel better, but if you do come across content that has Free Palestine, Free Palestine, Free Palestine, Palestinian flags, maybe something that will make you feel better is to actually go into those profiles, see that those people have 0 to 1 friends or no content, and understand that it's a bot. How much of it is it shaping? It's a lot shaping. It's shaping a lot. And social media platforms don't like to be transparent, typically, unless there's a communication incentive for them to be transparent about how many bots are on the actual platform. Okay? And that was one of the big sticking points of Musk, if you remember when he was trying to take over Twitter, when he found out just how many bots were on the platform. He was like, wait. I thought that I was buying a place of public discourse, of genuine content, and a place to perhaps advertise my other 3 companies that I'm involved in, whatever, right? I mean, you can't advertise to bots, right? It changes the business model. Right.
Yeah, I also think that is a great way of also kind of touching on the first 2 questions, which is, there is this kind of economic incentive to not make a place so bad that people want to leave, which is true for Twitter. When Gamergate happened, their numbers start to go down in terms of users. And it was only once they added moderation things got better. But the truth is, there is always going to be that tension, and between commercialization and this standard of hate speech or free speech. And I think the bot example is really interesting because I think this is where I do think that the government has a big job to do that it's not doing, because technology is moving much quicker than Washington is. And not only that, Washington has a lot of its own issues. And so what we're seeing is really what happens when you have complete deregulation around any of this. And of course, it doesn't necessarily mean that we should be shutting down, it doesn't mean we should be shutting down speech, but bots are a great example. That's not free speech, that's like a form of state-sponsored, not espionage. Propaganda. Propaganda, and it's affecting the actual election results. Like, these are things that really matter, and have nothing to do with free speech. They have to do with protecting people. And so I do hope that at some point, as things advance and younger people start to get into leadership positions, both in Jewish establishment organizations as well as in the government, that there's going to be a quicker response, because that's really the solution, one of the big solutions that's simply not occurring, and we're seeing the negative results of that.
Yeah, I'm going to take this one last question because I know you've been waiting, and then we'll wrap up.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
So many of us feel that we are being accused by contributing to the hate speech, by practicing freedom of speech against the government. I want to hear from your expert position how to deal with this claim, that we are actually contributing to antisemitism by practicing free speech against our government that we believe is responsible.
So the question is around the protest movement, particularly protests against the Israeli government, and how folks who are engaging in protest using social media are being accused of contributing to anti-Semitism by protesting the Israeli government using social media platforms.
Do you want to take a break?
Is that the question? Is the question the Israeli government protesting, or?
No, it's
How do people who are exercising
those who are
their free speech
using
rights
free speech
against
to protest the Israeli
government?
government,
In America, or like?
Or in
or
Israel.
anywhere
Yeah.
by contributing on these platforms.
Well, I would say they are actually, because if you look in France, just yesterday, a Jewish woman was stabbed pretty much. I'd say within these protest movements, they need to calm down the anti-Semitism they do, pretty much.
She's talking about protest movements against the Israeli
She's
government.
talking
Against the
about
Israeli
Israel.
government, that's a different thing. Yeah, it's different. I don't think you are then.
I think we missed an element of joy which is
Please, bring it back.
that social media platforms also allow people to organize and revolutionize, and that's not only been true in Israel for the protest movement against the government, but also in other places like the Arab Spring, right? So like that is a missed element of joy in this panel discussion, but it's absolutely true. Social media is a platform for people to organize in that way. And for people accusing the protest movement against the Israeli government of contributing to anti-Semitism, I would just say that the protest movement against the Israeli government is part of what we're fighting for, which is the only Israeli democracy in the Middle East. So I think that should put a pin in it right there. And I also think people should just recognize within the Jewish community in general and within Israel, there are so many people who are just experiencing what's going on in such raw and emotional ways. People who genuinely feel betrayed by the system, betrayed by the government, betrayed by the IDF, whatever it is. If their loved ones are in Gaza, shalom nida, she'yachzaru b'shalom. I mean, I really think that we should all be very authentic, proud, and supportive of each other, period, end of sentence. That's all I have to say on it.
Well, on that note, I want to thank our panelists for bringing your wisdom, for teaching all of us today. Thanks to our audience, and thank you all for being here.
תודה רבה.
Tal-Or.